Good day to all of you all around the planet. Thank you for joining me. Hello to Portugal. Hello to New York City. Hello to Australia, Paris, and Germany. Thank you for coming in. At a motivational conference, I met a fellow who had been diagnosed with an incurable disease. Probably 7 years earlier, doctors found this odd thing with him and they started treating him. And over 7 years, he went to over 100 doctors. He was taking 100 prescription pills a day, and he wasn't getting any better. Finally, doctors gave him an experimental risky test, and they said, sorry, you're going to die. At that point, he quit waiting for somebody else to heal him, and he started to do the inner work. And so he took the affirmation, I am healed, I am healed, I am healed. After about 6 weeks, he started to feel better. He had been down to about 120 pounds, started gaining weight, started feeling better, and over a period of time, he was completely restored to full health. When I met him, he looked vibrant and vital. He was working at home, spending time with his wife and children. He was a happy, happy man. So how did that happen? Is it possible that we're so preoccupied with symptoms that we fail to recognize the core? Is there an intrinsic relationship between mind, spirit, and body and emotion? There is. I knew a woman who was a massage therapist, and she was assigned to work on an older woman in the hospital who was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this therapist was also a coach of sorts. And so she began chatting with this woman, and the woman revealed that 25 years earlier, she had had a fight with her sister and hadn't spoken to her since. And this therapist coached her through the process, and she broke down in tears. And she said, I really want to connect with my sister. I think I will. And the therapist happened to be back in the hospital a week or two later. And there's this woman, fully dressed, putting makeup on. She's supposed to die. And the therapist said, what are you doing? What's going on? She said, well, I phoned my sister and we had a lovely talk and we made amends. And she said, the next time they took me down for x-rays, they found no cancer. They're sending me home. I've heard many stories like that. So how does that happen? Well, you have to recognize that as spiritual beings, it's the spirit we dwell in that determines our health or lack thereof. But we tend to think if we can just remove the symptoms, I'll be okay. But we have to remove the cause of the symptoms. I heard a story about a New York subway where there was a conductor and a train engineer. And the conductor came and said, hey, I just saw a warning light on the dashboard. It said brake failure imminent. And the engineer said, what did you do? He said, well, I unscrewed the light bulb. I didn't want to look at that light bulb. Probably not a true story, but it's kind of symbolic, isn't it? That we don't look at why things are happening. Another analogy is a guy's walking down the street and he has a hole in his pocket and he keeps losing change out of the hole. And so he goes out and he gets a second job to fill up the change. But the more money he gets, the more falls out of the hole. And what he really needs to do is sew the pocket. And sewing the pocket means getting aligned with your spirit, getting aligned with higher power. Now, I've been organic gardening for many, many years. And at first, I tried to study what keeps pests and bugs out of the garden. And all the gardening books said the same thing, and the experts. They said, well, you can put beer out for slugs and put this powder on for beetles and worms. That'll work. But they always came to the same point. They said, if you have healthy soil, rich with nutrients, then the plant will feed on that soil and it'll have a natural immunity to pests and bugs and problems. So what we want to do, instead of picking bugs away and putting more beer out for the slugs to get lost in, we want to nurture our spirit so very deeply that nothing in the world can take away our well-being. Someone told me that in medical schools, I don't know if this is true recently, but a while back, they were saying that medical schools do not teach nutrition. Now, that's unbelievable to me. All they teach is about fixing stuff that's broken. But unless you take care of the body, more stuff is going to get broken. It's just the way it works. And so really, Jesus said, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. That's a very metaphysical statement. What he was saying was that when you nurture yourself spiritually, the physical world will take care of itself perfectly and organically. And lesson 50 of A Course in Miracles is, I am sustained by the love of God. So, if you're gardening, if you just pluck the weeds out from the top of the soil, they're going to come back. You have to get a little tool and move in and remove the root of the weed. That's the way it works. So most diseases can be extremely alleviated or eliminated entirely by greater self-care, greater self-nurturing. Thoreau had one of my favorite statements of all time. He said, for every person hacking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. Let me say that again, Henry David Thoreau. For every person hacking at the branches of evil, there is one striking at the root. Now, let's talk a bit about terrorism. Terrorism is a horrible problem in our world today. People go out shooting people en masse, 14, 17, 25 children, people in malls, schools. It's a terrible tragedy. And so lots of people want to have gun control. Well, that might help a little bit, but it's really you're dealing with the branch of evil, not the root. If you really want to end terrorism, there are two ways to do it. One, you have to get at the root of terrorism, which is powerlessness. And nobody who feels powerful and loved and cared for and valuable would have any desire to go out and hurt anybody. It's not a natural instinct. It doesn't come with the product. It's a fear-based aberrant of the human condition. Now, I had a buddy, his name was Lou Chalupa. I used to live with him for a while. And he was a high school teacher, beautiful man. And he is an English teacher. And he petitioned the administration to let him teach one period a day of what he called humanities. And they let him. They gave him permission as an experiment. And in this class, he moved away from academics and more toward connection. And so he would put two director's chairs up in front of the school, in front of the classroom. And one by one, the kids would come up. Well, how you doing? What's going on in your world? How are things with your parents? What's in your heart? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? What do you want to do with your life? How can I support you? And he developed intimate healing relationships with these students. And he did oddball things, like he would have the senior citizens come into the school and around Halloween, and they would dress up as teenagers. Teenagers would dress up as seniors. And he took the kids to homeless shelters and had them feed the hungry. And that class became so popular as an elective that before long he was teaching 6 periods a day of humanities. And then it was so popular that they hired another teacher to teach it, because kids were hungry for meaning. They were tired of academics. They wanted connection. And I lived with Lou for a couple of years, and we would get calls from his students. And it would be years after they graduated. And I remember one day a kid called, he said, my father died suddenly. And Lou took the day off of work, and he went canoeing with this young man. That was the kind of connection he inculcated. Now, kids like that who get pure love have no desire to go out and shoot people. because they're empowered. They have teachers and parents who love them and care about them. So this is striking at the root of evil, healing it from the ground up instead of waiting till something horrible happens and then trying to fix it with piecemeal symptoms that don't really work because it keeps coming back. Now, let's get a little more personal about this. So, a lot of us are worried about terrorism, and meanwhile, we have not addressed what I call the inner terrorist. And I coach a lot of people. I train people to be coaches. I have a coach training program. Go to my website, alancohen.com. It's a holistic coach training. Starts in September. And most of my clients who are in pain, which is everybody's in pain in one way or another, has some kind of inner terrorist voice where you're beating yourself up, cruel to yourself. You look in the mirror, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm old. Too many wrinkles, nobody will love me. Too old to get married, nobody wants to be with me. And we say horrible things to ourselves that we would not say to anybody else. I remember, even me, I remember once I broke a glass in the kitchen that dropped on the floor. And these words came out of my mouth. It said, "You clumsy idiot." And I thought, well, it wasn't a very nice thing to say. I wouldn't say that to another person. I would never say that to another person. But inside my own head, I had this dialogue going, beating myself up, putting myself down, judging myself, resisting myself, being cruel to myself. So the real way to heal terrorism in the planet, or any kind of aberration, is mostly by self-care, self-kindness, and self-forgiveness. And we always have two voices in our head, the voice of fear and the voice of love. And so you might practice today while you're home. If you're in quarantine or can't go out, what a lovely time to look inside and start to give yourself positive messages. Look in the mirror naked. Say, sure, love you. I see your beauty. I see your inner light. I see your wholeness. I see your holiness. You're worth it. You're worth your dreams. You're worth your partnership. You're worth your prosperity. You're worth your healing. I am worth my healing. I deserve healing. And so we're back to the fellow I described at the beginning of our session today. He quit waiting for someone else to remove his symptoms, and he lined up with his spirit. I am healed. I am healed. I am healed. See, now, the way an affirmation works is you're not trying to convince yourself of something that's not true. You are reminding yourself of what is already true. And there was a person inside that man who was already healed. He wasn't trying to make healing happen. He was bypassing the appearance of disease, and he was dropping into the reality of his wellness and his wholeness. And he wasn't special. Anybody can do it. So don't wait till you've had 7 years of treatments and hundreds of doctors and hundreds of pills. Tell the truth now and beat the rush later. Why not? We said the other day that people use prayer as a last resort. But really, if we go to it as a first resort, we won't need to go through all the hard stuff that makes prayer a last resort. So let's drop into our wholeness today. Let's give ourselves a love message today. How about accepting ourselves today, even with our flaws and faults and our weight and our age and our wrinkles and our hair and all that stuff? How about if we just healed the inner terrorist, and as we found love and deep compassion and forgiveness for ourselves, then the outer world will rearrange itself to support us in the decision we've made to be whole just as we are. That's how healing happens. There's no way around it. I see your beauty. I see your wholeness. I see your perfect right to be healed and have perfect relationships and prosperity on every single level. I see you as a lovable, perfect, divine expression of God. And I think if we all do this, then this pandemic will lift more quickly and easily than we imagine. The economy will return and be perhaps even stronger if we change a few things. And our lives will begin to reflect the love of God, which is all we were born for in the first place. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow. And so it is.